That's right, your boy's back. Bibliophiles of the internet, my name is Adri, and today I'm slowly making my way back, starting with a belated March wrap-up. If you live under a rock or you're beaming in from the future, I had top surgery at the end of March, and as such I was not able to review the books I read that month, but now I'm back to show those books some love and finally restore balance to my personal book universe. Before we get started, I did want to say a huge thank you to everyone who reached out to me and shared well wishes and kind words about my surgery and my recovery. I got comments, I got messages, I got cards and gifts and care packages. It was so much. The amount of love I received was truly overwhelming and so much more than I ever thought it would be, and it really did help me and hold me up through the recovery process more than you know, so thank you so much for that. I'm still not quite back to 100% yet, so please be patient with me as I slowly play catch up and just sort of do my thing, but I'm doing well, I'm feeling great, super happy with my results, and everything's healing well, so I'm very grateful for that. This is still a booktube channel, so I'm not going to show you my chest. I didn't show you my chest to begin with. I'm not going to start now, so don't ask. Ma'am, this is a Wendy's. In case you missed it though, I did a live show with Amparo Ortiz and Adriana from Boricua Reads on Amparo's channel where we talked about our experience with micro and macroaggressions as Latinx people and marginalized people in the bookish community and the industry as a whole, and that will be linked down below in case you want to watch. Also, just to make my life easier, I have written full reviews for every single book I've read from March until now because I didn't want to forget anything, so while I will be condensing those reviews here into video format, they will be linked down below if you want to read them in full. But with that said, let's just get into the books. Continuing my tradition of reading my favorite book of the year in March, I started with my arc of 1500 Miles from the Sun by Johnny Garzavilla. This comes out from Skyscape on June 8th. It's an Own Voices queer Latinx YA story about Julian Luna, a gay Mexican-American teenager dying to move out of Texas, but first he has to make it through his senior year and graduate in one piece. One night after getting drunk at a party, he impulsively outs himself on Twitter, and as he tries to navigate being out at school and with his friends and family, his very cute Twitter crush slides into his DMs. Content warnings for verbal and physical child abuse, physical assault, homophobia and homophobic slurs, bullying, non-graphic references to suicidal ideation, disownment, descriptions of PTSD, panic attacks, and depressive episodes, some exploration of grief, references to underage drinking, and some graphic allusions to sex. I cannot even explain to you what I felt when I read this book because it just spoke to me on every single level imaginable. I have two soft pitches for this book. The first is, if the Selena song Dreaming of You was a book, it would be this book. My second soft pitch is that this book is like Aristotle and Dante with its slow pace and interiority, but if Ari was an extrovert and definitely down to clown. Hopefully one of those sells you on this book because I need everyone to pre-order it, request it from your library, put it on a wish list, buy it for your friend, read it, live it, love it, share it, stat. I love how this story is very slowly and deliberately paced. It really takes you through the seasons of Jules' senior year, and it perfectly captures that nostalgic high school feeling of trying to hold on to your friends and those last moments you're going to share together before you graduate. It definitely captures that magic of those everyday adventures, whether it's grabbing a dollar soda from the drive-thru after school, going to school dances, or attending football games you don't really care about. It's really about holding fast to those moments. And whether it's with Jules' family, his friends, or this new long-distance relationship he has with Matt, I feel like the story is really about love in all its power and its limitations. What love can do and what it can't. Love can support you, it can protect you, it can keep you going when things get tough, but at the same time, love can't make up for everything when it's not supported by actions. You see that with Jules' homophobic father, who very much subscribes to toxic machismo and this idea that real Mexican men aren't gay, which he uses as a synonym for weak. But you also see it in Jules' relationship with Matt, who's trying to figure out how to be there for someone when you can't physically be present. And in that respect, I love that this story understands, celebrates, and validates long-distance and online relationships. This is a love story for the ages and a love story we need right now because it shows how integral online relationships are to our everyday lives. Besides his physical presence, you miss nothing of Matt in this book. He and Jules are funny together, they have great banter and chemistry, but they're also vulnerable with each other and they're learning not only how to see the other person for who they are, but how to let themselves be seen and known in return, even with all their messiness and mistakes. They are definitely tested by the distance, they have to work on their communication, but Jules' relationship with Matt is a huge source of support and love for him throughout everything, and it's such a special part of the book. I truly cannot say enough good things about this story. It does take a very honest look at the hardships queer Latinx people face, but it's still full of so much hope and light and love. I could not give it any less than 5 stars. And before I move on, I should say that I will be having a live show with Johnny right here on my channel on May 15th, and we may be joined by a special guest, so stay tuned for that. On a slightly different note, the next book I read was my arc of Once Upon a Quinceañera by Monica Gomez Hira. This came out on March 2nd from Harper Teen. It's an Own Voices contemporary Latinx YA story about Carmen, who gets stuck working an unpaid summer internship being a party princess at a party entertainment company, and to make things worse, her new prince is her ex. Not only that, but the company is hired to be the court for someone's quinceañera, and that person turns out to be none other than Carmen's cousin and nemesis, Ariana, who apparently caused Carmen and her ex, Mauro, to break up in the first place. Content warnings for allusions to sexual harassment in the workplace, HP references, sexist slurs, mentions of underage drinking, some unchallenged fat phobia, catcalling and sexual harassment, allusions to cultural appropriation, references to sex, some violence of physical assault, and some exploration of parental estrangement. I did not really enjoy this, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. In theory, it seemed like a good fit for me because it's supposed to be this summary contemporary Latinx story about second chance romance and quince shenanigans, but it just really missed the mark. My biggest beef with the story is that all the tension stems from events that happen before the story begins, and the character dynamics are strongly dependent on those events, which are slowly revealed through flashbacks, but not enough and not quickly enough to properly contextualize the plot. And this is what defines the relationship between Carmen and her cousin, her ex, her mom, her family. So not only was the backstory itself extremely convoluted, but that lack of clarity made it really hard to tap into those pre-existing dynamics. I'm also not someone who thinks characters have to be quote-unquote likable in order to be redeemed or get a happy ending, but I did find there to be some toxic machismo and latent unchallenged misogyny being perpetuated in the story, especially by the romantic lead, and that did not make me want to root for this relationship. To this story's credit, it's a quick and entertaining contemporary full of shenanigans and drama with a capital D, but it left me feeling confused and disconnected overall, which is why I gave it 2 stars. On a much better note, after that I read my arc of The Passing Playbook by Isaac Fitzsimons. I buddy read this with my friend Alex, whose channel will be down below, and this one comes out on June 1st from Penguin Teen. It's an Own Voices queer sports romance about a young trans guy named Spencer who recently had to transfer schools because people were targeting him for being trans. Now he's trying to keep his head down and pass as a regular guy, so he joins the boys' soccer team, but his coach has to bench him due to a discriminatory law that says that players' files have to match their birth certificates. So now Spencer has to ask himself whether he should keep himself safe and let it go, or if it's worth it to out himself and take a stand against this injustice. Content warnings for allusions to past bullying, death threats and school lockdown, homophobia, misgendering, transphobia, religious fanaticism, and some brief non-graphic references to child death and overdose. This book is so necessary, and not simply because it speaks directly to anti-trans legislation affecting trans youth being at an all-time high, but because it explores transness in ways that we rarely get to see, and it reminds me of how much more there is still to explore of the quote-unquote trans experience. It's not often that we get to see stories with younger trans protagonists, especially young Black trans protagonists, and I personally have never read a story about a trans boy on hormone blockers who uses testosterone gel and who's actively prioritizing his safety by trying to pass as cis. And what's great about it is that the story doesn't linger on any of those things. It gives you just enough information as a jumping off point, and it doesn't subject its protagonist to being under a microscope for the sake of cis readers. It acknowledges the very real obstacles that trans people face, especially in academic settings, with so much nuance. What I love about this story is that it never once villainizes or stigmatizes people who don't come out for whatever reason, if they're not interested, if they're not able, if they're not ready. You definitely see that primarily in the romantic relationship Spencer develops with his teammate Justice, because Spencer is out to his family, fully supported by his parents, has connections to community and support, while none of that is true for Justice. While that does challenge their relationship, Spencer never once expects Justice to come out for him, and he never once sees Justice's closetedness as a threat to his queerness or his transness, and we need to see more of that. The story understands that everyone is on their own journey when it comes to their identity, and especially in a world that doesn't universally accept or protect queer people, there is no shame in prioritizing your own safety and your own readiness. This story shows us that not coming out doesn't mean you're not proud, it doesn't mean you're hiding or that you're being inauthentic. It means you're on your own path, and whether you share that with other people or not is a choice that only you can make. Related to that, there's a really great conversation about the connection between visibility and privilege. privilege. Passing is a privilege. Being visible and confident in that visibility is a privilege, and privilege is connected to power. So how then do we balance being visible and providing hope to those who might need it without endangering ourselves? If we have passing privilege or visibility, how do we use that power to continue uplifting our community, especially those who might be erased or overlooked? How can we protect and support people who can't be out or who don't want to be out without demanding their visibility or performance as a prerequisite for community or respect? These are the questions Spencer is facing in this book, and the story understands that there is no right or wrong choice. For trans people especially, there is not always a clear-cut solution that doesn't require some kind of sacrifice on our part, and sometimes that's the line we have to walk. This book adds to and complicates the conversations about queerness and transness that we still need to have both within the community and outside of it, and it deserves to be read for that alone. I cannot express how much I love this book, and I gave it 5 stars. After that, I finally read Ava Evergreen Semi-Magical Witch by Julie Abe. It's an Own Voices middle grade fantasy adventure story set in a Japanese-inspired world. It's about a witch named Ava who only has just a pinch of magic, and if she doesn't earn the ranking of novice witch before her 13th birthday, she will be stripped of her magic. To become a novice witch, she has to go protect and help a town, and when she lands in a small, forgotten coastal town, she sets up a semi-magical fix shop to try and help the townsfolk with creative fixes. However, the townsfolk don't trust her magical abilities, and the true test will come when Ava has to try and use her magic to save the town from the biggest magical storm in history, threatening sure destruction in its wake. Content warnings for some allusions to missing parents and some descriptions of fainting spells and injuries. This story takes definite inspiration from Kiki's Delivery Service, but it is completely unique in its magic system and its characters. I especially love how magic is used in this story because it doesn't come from reciting spells, but rather creating them on the spot, and their power comes from intention and context. I really enjoy the creativity that goes into speaking spells, and it makes the magic feel so much more personal to Ava, and we get to witness as she learns how to speak the intentions of her heart in a way that's both clear and clever because she has to be smart about how she wants to use her limited amount of magic. There's also really great messages about how other people believing in us can teach us how to believe in ourselves, and about how being kind and reaching out to others is its own kind of magic. Ava's spells may not always go according to plan, but the magic always finds its own way to do what's right, even if it's not what she expected. And when she learns to embrace the unexpected and start doing things her own way, it only strengthens her magic. Overall, this is a really fun, sweet, charming, magical adventure story with a great cast of characters and a unique magic system, and I loved it. I gave it 4.5 stars. Then for Tome Topple, I made Joss very happy by finally listening to Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri, read by Sonila Nankani. This is an Own Voices epic Mughal India-inspired fantasy about Mer, who is part human, part Amriti, and the Amriti are descended from desert spirits and nearly driven to extinction in pursuit of their powerful blood magic. When Mer's power and existence comes to the attention of a greedy and bloodthirsty emperor, she is forced into a marriage contract that places her in his ranks, and she has to use every ounce of will to resist fulfilling the emperor's agenda. And if she fails to maintain the world's balance, the gods themselves may awaken and seek vengeance. Content warnings for exploration of imperialism, death and parental death, descriptions of blood, injury, murder, and graphic violence, references to suicide and suicidal ideation, references to self-harm and blood magic, manipulation, misogyny, and magical stripping of consent. This is such a powerful fantasy story that really and truly hit me in the feels. It takes an unflinching look at the long-lasting cyclical consequences of imperialism and explores if it's possible to restore balance and whether affected communities can ever hope to heal from it. But even more than that, it presents a character who's struggling to find agency within a system that was designed to strip her of freedom and choice. The story asks, how do you navigate intention and how do you reclaim agency over your decisions and define your personhood in such a system? How do you maintain a semblance of dignity when you are systemically dehumanized? What really moved me in this story was the way the characters fought every single day to stay true to themselves and to each other in the face of inevitable destruction, pain, and and loss. Really, the story argues that choice is not merely about action, but rather it's about connection and intention. It's about forcibly wresting what we've always been taught to believe about ourselves from the hands of those who seek to erase us, and taking the time to understand what is true to us as defined by us. And that's what I found to be so moving about the beautiful and tender relationship between Mer and Amun, because the power between them is imbalanced to begin with since they're forced into a marriage contract, but they come to love each other in a way that they get to define for themselves. My other favorite part was the magic system, which ties spirituality, culture, and dance to magic. I believe it's inspired by a real form of religious dance, and that really shows in how the movement of the body and the meaning behind each movement produces magic and produces a deep connection to the earth, the spirit, and the gods. So all of that together really made for an unforgettable reading experience, and while I do think the plot and the pacing did get slowed down some by a lot of repetition, I still love this and I cannot wait to read the companion. I gave this one 4.5 stars. Then my Patreon pick for March was The Mermaid, the Witch, and the Sea by Maggie Tokuda Hall. This is a queer pirate book. It's about this non-binary, gender-fluid pirate who created the persona of Florian in order to escape their life as a starving orphan and sail across the seas. Now the ship they work on has become one that takes on unknowing, wealthy passengers, promising them safe transport before turning on them and selling them as slaves. One of these passengers is Lady Evelyn Hasegawa, and when she develops feelings for her secret pirate escort, the two of them get tangled up in freeing a mermaid and find themselves on the run from Florian's fellow pirates. Content warnings for blood, injury, and graphic violence, murder, references to slave trade, allusions to rape, alcoholism, and descriptions of torture. If you're looking for a very queer, very adventurous pirate story about romance, magic, and storytelling, this is it. What really captivated me about this story was its willingness to be playful and innovative. It keeps turning on its head in really interesting ways, to the point where you're introduced to the titular mermaid, the witch, and the sea, and yet they do not turn out to be what or who you expect. But my favorite part of the book is how it explores the connection between truth and stories. It explores how we define our truths by our memories, when memories are stories that we tell ourselves about ourselves, and how stories can both obscure the truth and reveal the truth. And there's also this idea that the most true stories we possess are literal magic. It's a story that gives actual power to emotion and truth, and shows in both literal and metaphorical ways how both of those things can change and affect the world around us. When all is said and done, this is about characters trying to rewrite their stories against impossible odds in a world that is determined to confine them to a single narrative when they are so much more than that. I'm purposefully being vague because I think it's a story that needs to be experienced firsthand. It's such an unforgettable, daring, whimsical adventure story that's gonna stick with me for conceivably the rest of my life. And shout out to Nico for being a real one and insisting that I read this book. You were right, I loved it, and I gave it 5 stars. The last book I read for March was my arc of The Cost of Knowing by Brittany Morris. This came out on April 6th. It's an Own Voices contemporary story with a touch of surrealism about 2 black teenage brothers, and the older brother, Alex, can see the future when he touches people or objects. Not only does he foresee his girlfriend breaking up with him when they touch, but he also gets a sudden vision of his younger brother's death, and now he's in a race against time and circumstance to see if he can prevent it or if he's powerless to stop it. Content warnings for anxiety and panic attacks, parental death and child death, grief, racism, brief mentions of suicide ideation, self-harm and suicide attempt, police brutality, references to slavery and rape, and descriptions of a mass shooting. This is definitely a challenging, hard-hitting, heavy story, but also one that is unflinching in both its truth and its call to healing. And I think it's very much a necessary story in how it understands America's long-held legacy of inflicting death, pain, and trauma on Black communities. To me, Alex's ability to see the future is a powerful allegory for how young Black men especially bear the weight of knowing the systemic pain that awaits them in this world before it happens. In some ways, being a young Black man in America is to accept your own death or the death of people you love before it happens. And what is that if not predicting the future based on what's been proven in the past? But even with that, this story is still about Alex realizing that he can either succumb to that pain or he can try to resist it by finding and creating moments of joy and love with his brother in the time they have left. To that end, the story also comments on toxic masculinity, especially in Black men, and how that insecurity often shows itself in moments of powerlessness. As the story progresses, Alex has to fight the instinct to detach, disassociate, and lash out at the world, when the harder work is learning how to be unafraid in how he loves and needs other people and actually confronting his sadness. Being afraid of the future, being anxious, being hurt doesn't mean that he's failed as a man. It means that he's human. Ultimately, I found this to be a powerful story about resilience, joy, and brotherhood in the face of extreme pain and loss. It's about Black boys trying to be joyful and unafraid, learning that their lives, their experiences, their history, their feelings, their joy matters. And this book makes space for all of those complicated emotions to exist. It's no secret that I highly recommend Slay, and now I wholeheartedly recommend The Cost of Knowing as well. I gave this one 4.5 stars. So those are all the books I read in March. I will most likely break up my recovery reads into 2 parts because I read so much in April, so look forward to that. If you've read any of these yourself, leave me a comment down below and let me know your thoughts. But that's everything I had for this March wrap-up today. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, educate yourself, be kind to yourself, take care of yourself, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page.